morning sun shines on the gleaming hide of a muscular ranch horse. The aroma of bacon and coffee drifts from the wood cook stove at a cow camp. Silver spurs jingle as the men and women of the West get set for another day in the saddle. From the heart of Canada's finest ranching country, this is the Spirit of the West with rancher and horse trainer Hugh McLennan and his collection of music, poetry, and conversations with the folks who live and work with horses and cattle in the Spirit of the West.
I think it was the great horse trainer and musician and author Mark Rashid who said this first. A good horse is never a bad color. And that point's well made this week in a poem from Reg Stewart.
He swung a big, wide houlihan, an artist with a rope. He filled his loop with almost every try.
And the Rangeland News looks at what's happening in the North American cattle markets.
Those cattle are going to be coming out. They're going to put some pressure on cattle prices.
And Baxter Black has a moving look at the end of a long-time family farm.
Well, it just makes me mad that people take food for granted. We've been married 30 years, built this business, paid our bills, put food on lots of tables, and now...
And I'll visit with an old friend this week. Reg Steward is the Superintendent of Field Operations and Ranch Safety Consultant with Ag Safe. And one of the reasons why he's so well respected by ranchers is because he's a pretty good cowboy. He played a huge role during the wildfires of last summer, and I'll coax a cowboy story or two out of him, I'm sure.
It was a pair that was beating us, and so that wasn't going to happen. And then once he started getting a little bit of air under all 4 feet there, when we looked back to see the Rocky Mountaineer go by with a lot of tourists in the dome car smiling, waving, and snapping cameras.
Rocky Mountaineer, of course, that passenger train that makes the trip across the Canadian Rockies all summer long, provided the audience for Reg's bronc ride. And on the Irvin Saddles and Western Wear Horse Training file, we'll look at the steps to take with a horse that's been laid off all winter in preparation for that first ride in the spring. Got another classic song of the West, and I sure hope your calves are all hitting the ground running. We're going to start off with a calving song from Jim Reeder.
I'm 3 weeks into calving time, and I'm 2 weeks behind on a matrimonial payment plan evidently I had signed. My wife said next year she's gonna take care of being crews. She claims she never sees me when all my calves are due. And I said, whoa, whoa, honey, cut me a little slack. Well, I'm a ranching man, and this you knew when you smiled and said I do. And she said, whoa, whoa, honey, let's get something straight. If I was a four-legged critter, I'd be someone with whom you would relate. I've got 2 calves in the barn tonight, and they're looking kind of down. So I figured maybe best if I just stayed and hung around. My dinner, it was hot at 6 by 11, freezing cold. Oh, but nothing quite compared to the iceberg at the door. She said, whoa, whoa, honey, cut me a little slack. Well, I'm a lonesome girl in a lonesome world, and I want my husband back. And I said, whoa, whoa, honey, I'll make it up to you. When calving time is over, I'll name the best one of the bunch after you. And I said, whoa, whoa, honey, cut me a little slack. Well, I'm a ranching man, and this you knew when you smiled and said I do. And she said, whoa, now hold on, honey, let's get something straight. If I was a four-legged critter, I'd be someone with whom you would relate. Yeah, if I was a four-legged critter, I'd be someone with whom you would relate.
Jim Reeder wrote that song, and he calls it Calvin Time. And I think I counted 5 songs in my collection, all with that same title. And you'll probably hear a few more over the coming weeks. Well, Reg Stewart and I have ridden a few trails together, and he's sitting here with me today. And As we look out at the snow, last summer seems like a long time ago now, but boy, it was something.
Yeah, Hugh, last summer in the Williams Lake area in particular, where I call home, the fire situation started July the 7th, unprecedented number of lightning strikes. They say they were coming in so fast they couldn't write them down.
Man, oh man. And it was after a record wet spring, and it was just after we got back from our Alaska Spirit of the West cruise. And up until that time, I was riding across these pastures, and my horse was sinking to her fetlocks because it was like riding on a sponge. And I thought, man, we won't have to worry about wildfires this year. And then it just turned around like that. It got hot and dry, and like you say, those lightning strikes happened, and it was just unbelievable chaos, I can imagine, for the ranchers in the caribou country.
Yeah, there was a good deal of concern, and there was the opportunity to grow and figure out what to do in that situation, and there was a real sense of urgency to that, and the cowboys and the ranchers and the caribou really showed their steel and their grit through that thing. There was a tremendous amount of frustration as it first unfolded, and different people trying to figure out what to do, but everything came together in the end.
When or at what point did you become really involved?
About the middle of July, Kevin Boone from the BC Cattlemen's Association reached out, and they had sought special permission to get a ranch liaison into the Emergency Operations Center in Williams Lake. And so with his consent and urging and the work of my executive director at AgSafe, Wendy Bennett, and her support, I went into the Emergency Operations Center there and began to work on behalf of the producers in the area.
And what were some of the biggest problems and challenges that you found when you got there?
A lot of it came with the unprecedented number of fires, the size that they were growing to so quickly, and then the rapid need to effect evacuation orders. And as Darren Campbell, a member of the Caribou Regional District staff, said, deciding on the evacuations and the alerts was the easy part, but managing inside the evacuation orders was a challenge. And so there was a challenge as to who was going to stay and who could go, and people trying to find out where they fit in that diverse nature of getting out of there or staying there to look after their livestock. And there was crops about to come off, and so there was a lot of work to be done. So the challenges were understanding the necessity of being there, who should be there, who needed to go, trying to figure out who was an asset and who was a liability. And there were a lot of challenges within the Emergency Operations Center.
Well, I know you took two of your own horses in there, and let's talk more about the challenge of getting those cattle to where you thought the fires weren't going to be in just a few minutes. And we've got a song from an Australian cowboy singer as well, when the Spirit of the West continues right after this. Welcome back to the Spirit of the West. Reg Steward, Superintendent of Field Operations and Ranch Safety Consultant for AgSafe, is here today, and we're remembering the unprecedented wildfires of 2017, devastating for ranchers in California, Idaho, Montana, Alberta, Saskatchewan, all over the West. And Reg was one busy guy during the fires in the BC interior. Do we have any idea yet on the total number of cattle deaths from those fires?
I'm not familiar with what the total number was. I heard the other day, though, that it was in the area of 300. I don't know for sure.
Yeah. But what a huge challenge when you don't even know for sure where the fire is going to go, which way to take the cattle, what to do with them. Yeah.
The mapping that we did come up with was a real help in trying to figure out where to move them, and that was essential. And so some of the work that was done again by the Caribou Regional District with their updated maps all the time, they handled that end really well. The BC Wildfire Service, they were doing their best to plot out edges of the fire and to help us in establishing who needed to move where.
Yeah. Oh boy, they were monsters, those fires. Like, they just weren't going to die down until fall. It was just,
Yeah, the fires, because of the vast number of them as well, it was very difficult to establish containment. Some of the fires were no bigger than in previous years, but because there were so many of them and the resources were stretched so thin, then it was really important for people who were capable of being an ally in the fight against these fires, that they were in a position to remain and to find themselves in a defensive posture for their land and property where that was safe and practicable.
Now, as far as I remember, there were no fatalities.
There were no fatalities, and that was an amazing part of what happened in those fires. It was good. There was cooperation between all of the agencies in securing that, and it was very helpful when we came up with a viable permitting system, because it assisted with knowledge of who was where, what they were doing, how many people were there, who was remaining, and this helped with the security for the RCMP and the armed forces, as they were able to determine who should or should not be in a place. So it minimized some of the possibility of looting and that sort of thing as well. That was always a concern.
Yeah.
The mapping that we were able to do allowed us to have people remain there and stay there and actually take safe routes to and from town to get vital services, whereas when they were there without a permit, there was a lot of sneaking around the back roads to get places, and it was nice to eliminate that with a straight down the road kind of thing.
Mm-hmm. Well, let's talk about some of the amazing things that ranchers and you were able to accomplish during those fires, right after a cowboy singer who is from Australia but spent quite a while in the States opening for the Sons of the Pioneers. Here's Leighton Watts.
On a cool, clear morning, neath the chuck wagon's awning, there's a cussin', grumbling trail cook throwing bacon in the pan, and the sounds of camp a-stirring and the cattle lowly murmuring makes a man feel good to wake up in this wide western land. And the cowboys come alive to another long day's drive. With our backs to the sun, we'll be riding in a while, and the horses shake and shiver to the flies down by the river, but they'll soon be shook and saddled, ready for a dusty mile. Yippee-ki-yi-yi, yippee-ki-yi-yo, glad to be a-living in this real-life rodeo. Mighty whips are cracking and the hooves are clopping, clattering, raising soft clouds of dust on the sweet-smelling land. And I raise my eyes to heaven and thank the Lord I'm leading a life on the trail as an old cowhand. Yippee-ki-yi, yippee-ki-yi-oh, I'm glad to be living in this real-life rodeo. Cups are steaming and the glowing sun's a gleaming, with the last morning star bedding down for the day. Through the long grass and the timber, 27 cowhands limber, a moving and a driving down this wide highway. Yippee-ki-yi, yippee-ki-yi-oh, glad to be a-living in this real-life rodeo. Yippee-ki-yi, yippee-ki-yi-yo, glad to be a-living in this real-life rodeo.
Boy, he makes that big 12-string ring. I guess one of Leighton's best-known songs would be the one he wrote called The Day the Trigger Died. Well, getting back to the wildfires of last year with Reg Steward, I'm sure, Reg, that you saw some amazing things done by ranchers to protect their property and their livestock.
I think specifically the battle that went on at the Choco Ranch, where the fire came on them in the Hansville area, and they really were in a defensive posture from the get-go. And so the leadership of Jordan Greer and his wife Crystal and their whole crew, including people like Pat Jasper, who ultimately lost his place in the fire, and the battle that they put on was an amazing piece of work to save their ranch. They lost some corral structures in one of the buildings, one of the houses, but it was a heroic battle that they put on, and that was one circumstance. I think that the work that was done on Ty Johnson's place, I'm a little bit partial because I ride for Ty in the summer months and get to cowboy for him at the Onward Mission. And he had taken very seriously the instruction that we had when people were allowed to stay and take off their forage crops, which would have made it very, very difficult had we not taken off the vast volumes that we did. And the instruction was that they had to make sure that they had adequate fire suppression there in case their baler caught on fire or something. Yeah. And they did have a baler catch on fire and pulled it off to the side and suppressed the fire right away. And that was a good piece of adhering to the safety protocols that we had put in place, and yet it affected the work they could do.
Yeah. I want to get a little bit into your cowboying for the Onward Mission Historical Ranch in that great, big, beautiful country. I believe Pat Jasper is going to be inducted into the BC Cowboy Hall of Fame at the Williams Lake Indoor Rodeo, and I think that's on April the 22nd. And Dean and Lorraine Miller from the Chilco Ranch. In fact, I was talking with Dean at the Kamloops Cowboy Festival a few weeks ago. They've been on several Spirit of the West cruises with us, and they just told us a little bit of what they had to deal with and how that was going. So.
Yeah, they had a tremendous battle there, as I say, and there were others. Brian Poffenroth and the fight that he and his crew put up at Risky Creek was exemplary as well. And so tremendous precaution for human safety, and yet great hard work to beat back this monster that was coming their way.
Yeah. We were looking at the skies all through August and just, praying for rain, and a cloud would come over and it was gone, and there wasn't a drop. Yeah. And then 1 or 2 days we got a few little sprinkles, but then that was it. And my goodness, I am never going to complain about rain again, after summer like that.
Well, the summer before, my riding buddy and I counted the number of days we didn't wear long johns in that summer and had 3. So we were complaining about that, but not compared to last summer's.
No. Wow. Well, let's talk a little more about your riding job and your horses, things like that. But next, it's Baxter Black and a touching story about the end of a family farm, when the Spirit of the West continues right after this.
Howdy, friends. This is Baxter Black on Spirit of the West with Hugh McLennan, with a little peek at the death of a small hog farm. Ladies and gentlemen and followers of cowboy humor, in a moment of weakness, I, Baxter Black, have written another book. I appreciate it. Its title is Scrambled Wisdom. Almost isn't is it? Which almost makes sense. Well, our offer does make sense. Only $19.95 plus shipping. The solid gold guarantee. Call 800-654-2550. Online at BaxterBlack.com. Well, that's the last of 'em, he said. Joe bought the younger sows and the baby pigs, and he may take a lot of the crates and panels and elevators and stuff, but I doubt the buildings will be much use to anybody. They're pretty worn out. Well, I'm glad we didn't replace them 2 years ago when things got good for a while. We'd still be paying on them. Yep, we just got lucky, I guess. In more ways than one. 2 kids are through college already, and it's not like we're ready to retire. Oh, no, we're not retiring. Don't let anyone get that idea. We'll still farm, sell our grain is all, unless we decide to get back into cattle. They sure won't be like the pigs, though. Yep, pigs treated us good. You really can't complain, but things change. I just can't. Those no good, nameless, faceless. Hey, love, we already been through that. It's nobody's fault. The whole industry is completely different. People like our product. We done a great job promoting pork. The consumer's paying $13 for a full rack of ribs at Tony Roma's. At Christmas, you could have bought a fat hog for less than a meal for two. I know. I can't explain it. The price of pork has less to do with the price of hogs than the address of a restaurant. The public doesn't even know or care. Well, I've always been philosophical about the ignorance of the consumer. When I pay $80 for a tire, never crosses my mind the miserable wage the rubber workers paid in Borneo. Well, it just makes me mad that people take food for granted. We've been married 30 years, built this business, paid our bills, put food on lots of tables, and now, when we should be able to think about selling to Jake and Louise or Sean or any young couple, we find we got nothing to sell. Our business went extinct. Hey, Walmart put a lot of people out of business, too. It was a good life for us, and we can be thankful. There ain't no use crying about it. I'm not crying about it. I know, he said. I am. This is Baxter Black on Spirit of the West with Hugh McLennan. Thanks for listening.
Rangeland News is next with quite a few interesting stories, and here it is, early April, and Ian Tyson wrote this beautiful song about the way it is this time of year out on the eastern slopes.
Should have seen it in your eyes. I could never read your eyes. So lost in love was I. They'd always take me by surprise. You were dreaming of the Southland. Ah, your love comes and goes. It's just like the weather, babe. Only heaven really knows. Just like springtime in Alberta. Warm sunny days and the skies are blue. Then without a warning, another winter storm comes raging. And the mercury's falling. I'm left all alone. Springtime in Alberta chills me to the bone. I can see the storm clouds coming. Lord, they're dark across the sky. The same look that I've seen so many times when I've looked into your eyes. So I'll turn up my old collar, pull my hat way down low. All the wind's getting cold now, dropping down to near zero. Just like springtime in Alberta. Warm sunny days, endless skies are blue. Then without a warning, another winter storm comes raging through. And the mercury's falling. I'm left all alone. Springtime in Alberta
news of the Rangeland, a roundup of news and coming events from around the West.
At the top of page 1, it says the latest numbers show more cattle than analysts had expected going into feedlots, and that could cause a drop in prices later this year. Gary Crawford has the details.
Placements into feedlots in February, 1.8 million heads, 7% above February a year ago. Marketing's up only 2%, leaving feedlots with 11.7 million head, 9% more than a year ago. Those placements were at the upper range of market expectations. Why?
Probably a lot of it reflects the fact that you're still looking at some very, very dry conditions in the southern plains. Without the ability to keep those animals on winter pasture, without the ability to keep them on some sort of native grass, they've been moving into feedlots.
We've had a bunch move in the last 3 months, so sooner or later,
those cattle are going to be coming out. They're going to put some pressure on cattle prices.
USDA's fed steer average price last year at this time $135 a hundredweight. Current price about $126. Prices this summer or fall could drop to $115 average. Gary Crawford for the U.S. Department of Agriculture, Washington.
British Columbia rancher David Haywood Farmer is the new president of the Canadian Cattlemen's Association. Dave takes over from Dan Darling of Ontario, who is now past president, and Bob Lowe of Alberta becomes the vice president. Dave and his wife Bonnie run a cow-calf operation on a Century Ranch at Savinaw, BC, and Dave is the past president of the BC Cattlemen's Association and was also the chair of the Canadian Cattlemen Association's Foreign Trade Committee, Domestic Agriculture Committee, and Regulations Committee. During his 2-year term, he says he plans to encourage the government to implement the Trans-Pacific Trade Deal, initiate a freer trade agreement with China, and see technical barriers to exporting red meat to Europe resolved within the comprehensive economic and trade agreement. And Dave and his wife Bonnie celebrated their 25th wedding anniversary a few years ago with us on a Spirit of the West cruise, and it was great having them along. The CFIA recently confirmed a case of equine infectious anemia in Strathcona County in Alberta. The case was confirmed on February 21st, according to the Alberta Equestrian Federation website. The horse, which had shown clinical signs of the disease, was euthanized shortly after a test sample was taken by a vet. The National Cattlemen's Beef Association and the Washington State Cattlemen's Association are expressing their opposition to a decision to introduce about 200 grizzly bears onto public lands in Washington State. Some ranchers have suggested the grizzlies should be released into Washington, D.C. instead. Well, his wandering cowboy and his old guitar head up to Kearsley, British Columbia for a fundraiser for the Wounded Warriors Battlefield Bike Ride, and that takes place in June. And the event, this fundraising event takes place at the Penwy Bryn Farm in Kearsley. I expect to be sharing some songs and stories there on Saturday, April 21st. And then we head to Red Deer for the big main event Horse Expo, where I'll be behind the mic for the Trainers Challenge again. That runs April 27th to 29th at the Westerner. And we're looking forward to the Big Ivan Danes Country Music Picnic and Open Trainers Challenge, August the 9th to the 12th. I'll have the Western Spirit Band with me there. And then September 7th, the boys and I will be at the Old McDonald's Music Festival. And we'll be on stage Saturday, September the 8th. And that place is beautiful, right there on the south shore of Buffalo Lake near Erskine. And we've got more bookings coming. Stay tuned. Next regular sale at the Kamloops Yards of the BC Livestock Co-op is Tuesday, April 17th. And April the 20th, it's the 81st Annual Williams Lake Bull Sale. And let's see, May the 5th, the Williams Lake Equipment Auction. And May the 12th, the Consignment Equipment Auction in Kamloops. Get all the information at bclivestock.bc.ca. And at the Innisfail Auction Market, regular Wednesday sales at 9 a.m. The butcher cows and bulls start coming through, calves and yearlings to follow. Bred cows about noon, and you can call to book your herds. The number is 1-800-710-3166, and the next horse sale there, April the 28th. And for all the details, see InnisfailAuctionMarket.com. Okay, that takes us down to this week's final item. And, you know, we had not been to a movie in a theater since before the days of cell phones. But Billy and I went to one along with my brother Jim and his wife Linda recently. I sat in an aisle seat, a little roomier there, and just as the feature was about to start, Jim got up and he started working his way along the seats to the aisle. Excuse me, oops, sorry, stepped on a few toes. Oh, I gotta hurry, excuse me. And I said, Jim, couldn't you have done this before the movie started? No, he said in a loud whisper. The turn off your cell phone, please message just flashed up on the screen. And mine's out in the car. And that's the Rangeland News. Coming up in the Urban Saddles and Western Wear horse training file, a look at a pre-flight checklist for a horse when you're ready for the first ride after he's had all winter off. And there's more from Reg Steward and more good music when the Spirit of the West continues right after this. Welcome back to the Spirit of the West. The Urban Saddles and Horse Training file's coming up, and we will look at a checklist for that first ride on a horse that may not have been touched all winter. And right now, we have a missing cow report from Cecil Cravens.
She has 4 feet, not 2, brown eyes, not blue, and oh, how those 4 feet can move. Has anybody seen my cow? Big flat nose, her udder shows a heifer, yes sir, one of those. Has anybody seen my cow? Now if you run into a dogie who's not covered with burrs, no fleas, no ticks, she's a-looking slick, you bet your life, hey, that ain't her. Well, could she bawl? Could she move? If she could, her could she'd chew. Has anybody seen my cow? And if you run into a cowboy who's a pretty good hand, please send him here to tend these steers while I go looking for my brand. She hit the trail with a big high tail, out there looking for a male. Has anybody seen my cow? Now if you're wondering how a dumb old cow's so easy to lose, well, if you're heading there, she doesn't care. It's the other way she'll always choose. Here's a photograph of that ornery calf. Take a good look, but please don't laugh. Has anybody seen my cow? Well, could she bawl? Could she move? If she could, her could she'd chew. Has anybody seen my cow? Has anybody seen my cow?
The 17th annual Spirit of the West Cruise will be something unforgettable. My wife Billy and I will be hosting a big group of ranchers, farmers, horse and cattle folks, and Spirit of the West listeners for a trip I know many of you have had on your bucket list for a long time. September 16th, 2018, we will sail out of Quebec City and cruise Canada's maritime provinces in all the glory of the fall colors, including stops in Charlottetown, Prince Edward Island, Sydney and Halifax, Nova Scotia, St. John, New Brunswick and the Bay of Fundy, Bar Harbor, Maine, Boston, Portland, Maine, and Cape Liberty, New Jersey, with an optional stay in New York City. Now, just for the Spirit of the West group, we have a tour of a cattle operation in Nova Scotia. We'll have all our great Western music concerts and sing-alongs, and we'll be swapping lots of ranching stories. And we'll have a lot of special activities just for our group. You'll find more details on the cruise section of our website at hugh-mclennan.com. and on our cruise Facebook page. And you can always call the toll-free number 1-800-530-0131.
Now it's time for the Horse Training File, brought to you by Irvine Tack and Western Wear, Canada's largest Western store.
The question is, my horse has been turned out all winter. I want to start riding soon. What should I do to get him ready? And you know, that is such a common question at this time of year. Some great horses can be caught and saddled and ridden off in the spring for the first ride and be just like they were on that last ride in the fall. But by far the biggest percentage of them will need to go through a checklist, and how long it takes to get them ready depends, of course, on the individual horse. With some of them, it's almost like going back to square one and restarting them. Now, I like to start with the feel on the halter. The amount of resistance you feel in the shank will tell you a lot about where the horse is at. Next thing I want is to have him yield his hindquarters in response to my pressure in both directions, and of course I want to yield his head, neck, and shoulders in the same way in response to my pressure. And this is, of course, from the ground. And once I'm satisfied with this, I'll take my horseman's stick and string and gently drop it over his back from both sides, and eventually I'll touch him all over with it and be able to swing it over his head. Next, I'll get my rope and gently touch him all over with it. Again, swing a loop over his head, and then drop the loop over his rump and be able to lead him ahead with it. And then, and this can be pretty important, I'll drop my rope over his withers. While I'm standing on his left, I let it drop down his right side, carefully reach down under his belly and pull it up until it makes contact with the area where the cinch is going to go. Okay, he seems ready to saddle, and I will then pull the cinch up in gentle increments. Now I'm ready for some more groundwork. I'll work him in a responsibility circle on a 12-foot line in both directions, and ask for a trot in both directions, and once he's relaxed and breathing easy, I'll ask him for a lope in both directions, and in most cases, if I do, he probably won't buck, but you know, some of them will. Once he tells me, though, that he's ready for me to get on, I'll work at having him stand perfectly still, and if he starts to move off after I put my left foot in the stirrup, I'll check him with the reins and start again. And once I'm in the saddle, I'll just settle there for a few seconds, shift my weight left and right and back and forth. And then I'll ask him to walk off, and after a few steps, I'll ask him to disengage his hindquarters in each direction, do a turn on the forehand, and then ask him to do a turn on the haunches. And if that all works, I think we're ready to ride off. I'll walk a ways, then I'll ask for a trot, and I won't ask him to lope until I've heard him blow his nose. And for Irvine Saddles and Western Wear, that is the Horse Training File. Boy, our horses sure enjoy that daily feeding of Hoffman's Horse Ration, and it keeps them looking and feeling good, too. You can find out more at hoffmanshorseration.com. Reg Stewart is still patiently sitting across from me, and we're just reminiscing about an incident you had when you didn't realize that the Rocky Mountaineer train was nearby, and you were sorting yearlings on your gelding, I think it was. And
yeah, I had my big gelding Coop who doesn't really have a fifth gear. He might go 3.5 to 4, but the tourists got a real kick out of me giving him some extra spur as we bucked our way around the 140 meadow. And
you were trying to, was it a yearling that was
looked like it was getting away? It was a pair that was beating us, and so that wasn't going to happen. And then
cowboy pride kicks in.
And then once he started getting a little bit of air under all 4 feet there, Reg Desmond decided he ought to fan him a little bit too, so I'm not sure that didn't help with that ride a little bit, but we did get that pair turned back.
I bet you there were cameras just snapping all over the place.
There were cameras snapping. We looked back to see the Rocky Mountaineer go by with a lot of tourists in the dome car smiling, waving, and snapping cameras. So.
Hey, there's a real cowboy. Oops, he just got bucked off.
Yeah, the ground was real. I stayed up, though. That was good. So, yeah, I'm too old to want to hit the ground, so determination kicks in.
Now, let's turn a little bit of a corner here. I want to go back to... I think it was about 2008 or somewhere around there, and you were working with what was then FARSHA, Farm and Ranch Safety and Health Association, and we were doing a series of ranch horse safety clinics. We did one in Cranbrook, and one Kamloops, and one in Williams Lake. And we were driving up to Williams Lake. I had Lucky the Wonder Horse in the trailer, and I have just got a CD from Wiley Gustafson, Wiley in the Wild West. Title song was The Hooves of the Horses. You remember that CD?
I still have that CD, and I still have a CD player. So.
That's kind of rare now, too.
It is, yeah. No, I crank that in and sing that great song and some of their other ones as I motor along the many miles that I put on as I promote the ag safe work of working with and for farmers and ranchers in the province and helping them to achieve compliance where that's required and to work in the safest manner possible. And it's just a privilege to be able to work with those people and do that work.
That's for sure. Well, let's kind of reprise that song right now.
All right.
The hooves of the horses, witching and sweet, is the music earth steals from iron-shod feet. No whisper of lover, no trilling of bird can stir me as hooves of the horses have stirred. They spurn disappointment, they trample despair, and drown with their drum beats the challenge of care. With scarlet and silk for their banners above, they're swifter than fortune, sweeter than love. Of the morning they gather and fly. In the hush of the nighttime I hear them go by. Horses of memory thundering through, flashing white fetlocks all wet with the dew. When you lay me to slumber, no spot you can choose, but will ring to the rhythm of galloping shoes. And under the daisies no grave be so deep for the hooves of the horses to sound in my sleep. For the hooves of the horses to sound in my sleep.
Gotta love that big baritone guitar being played by Ray Doyle in that one, Wiley in the Wild West, and Wiley has a brand new CD out. You'll be hearing some tracks from that in the coming weeks as well. And Reg Stewart is way too modest to talk about it, but he received a lot of tokens of appreciation from several groups who wanted to acknowledge the terrific work he did helping ranchers and saving cattle during that challenging time, and he'll be back again before too long. Next, a song the irrepressible Ben Crane did on stage during the dinner show with the Kamloops Cowboy Festival. He said he didn't know who wrote it. Well, I do, and I'll play it by the composer in our classic Western song segment when the Spirit of the West continues right after this. Welcome back to the Spirit of the West. Back at the Kamloops Cowboy Festival, Ben Crane opened his supper show set with a great up-tempo funny song, and then he masterfully changed the mood as he introduced a song that he said was sung to him by an old cowboy who couldn't sing. And Ben did such a great job of that song that he had us all blinking back a tear. Ben said he didn't know who wrote it, And we were way up in the balcony, and I almost stood up and hollered, "It was Gene Autry, Ben!" Gene wrote the song in 1936 and sang it in a movie called The Singin' Cowboy. And the song became a real favorite for working cowboys of that era who managed to either get to town and see the movie or hear it sung around a campfire. This is pretty rare. The original Gene Autry version of There's an Empty Cot in the Bunkhouse Tonight.
There's a cot unused in the bunkhouse tonight. There's a pinto's head hanging low. His spurs and chaps hang on the wall. Limpy's gone where the good cowboys go. There's a range for every cowboy, where the foreman takes care of his own. There'll be an empty saddle tonight, but he's happy up there, I know. He was riding the range last Saturday noon when a norther had started to blow. His head in his chest, heading into the west, he was stopped by a cry soft and low. There a crazy young calf had strayed from his maw and was lost in the snow and the storm. He lay in a heap at the end of the draw, huddled all in a bunch to keep warm. Limpy hobbled his feet, tossed him over his horse, and started again for the shack. But the wind got cold and the snow piled up, and poor Limpy strayed from his track. He arrived at 3 in the morning and put the maverick to bed. He flopped in his bunk, not able to move. This morning old Limpy was dead. There's a cot unused in the bunkhouse tonight. There's a pinto's head hanging low. His spurs and chaps hang on the wall. Limpy's gone where the good cowboys go. There's a place for every cowboy who has that kind of love. And someday you'll ride old Pinto again on that range up there above.
I have always been captivated by Reg Stewart's cowboy poetry. I love his singing, too. This one makes a pretty good point. Here's Red with The Bay.
They was hiring at the Pitchfork, and I had cowboyed some. Knew just enough to think I knew it all. A neighbor of my daddy said he knew Bob Morehouse well, so he got me on the roundup crew that fall. Well, the wagon boss issued my string when I got in that night, so I ain't even seen my horses yet. Now, he told me what their names were, but then I ain't good with names. I do remember one of them was Rhett. Next morning, we stretched out our lines and made a rope corral. The horses knew exactly where to go. I asked this cowboy next to me, "What color is old Rhett?" He smiled and said, "Son, I don't rightly know." Well, the horses stirred up clouds of dust inside the rope corral, and the cowboys stood with bridles in their hands. As each would call a horse's name, the wagon boss would nod, and a loop would settle deep inside the band. He swung a big, wide houlihan, an artist with a rope. He filled his loop with almost every try. The light was sort of hazy, but he recognized each horse by his silhouette against the morning sky. I saw this raw-boned bay horse in the middle of the pack. I told this older cowboy, "Look at that. "You see that long-haired cowhawk thing a-standing over there?" He said, "The one that moves just like a cat?" I said, "No, that big jug-headed thing with wind puffs on his hocks." "You mean the one with big old saucer eyes?" "No," I said, "that cat-ham thing with feet like dinner plates. I've never seen an ankle quite that size." He said, "You mean that bay horse with the nice short cannon bones? Just watch the way he makes his nostrils flare. His heart's as big as Texas, and his lungs are built to match. That kind of horse'll take you anywhere." I said, "I'm talking about the one that's got the droopy ear and a scar across the middle of his face." "You mean the one with withers that set well above his neck? Them kind of withers keep your cack in place." He stared right at the horses, never once looked out my way. "And I can't find the one he's talking about. But he don't seem to see that ugly thing I'm pointing to. I was going to ask him." Before I got it out, it came his turn. He called a name, a loop flew through the air, and out came the one that I was pointing to. He said, "This year's my favorite horse. I've had him since he's 3. He's seen some wrecks, but he ain't nearly through." Now, ain't it funny how we saw that bay through different eyes? He saw the good. I only saw the bad. All the time he knew that I was talking about his horse. He never cussed or acted like he's mad. He knew that I would hang myself. He handed me the rope. And sure enough, I pulled the noose up tight. And through all the years we've rode together, he ain't brought it up, and I ain't had to tell him he was right. Oh, it's my turn? Well, catch me Rhett, that big flea-bitten gray, the one whose withers set above his neck, with eyes as big as saucers and them nice short cannon bones, the kind you can depend on in a wreck.
Well, just before we leave you this week, I want to invite you, if you're in the area, up to a fundraising weekend of entertainment April 21st and 22nd at Penny Bryn Farms near Kersley, just south of Quesnel. It's to raise funds for Lindsey Chung's 600-kilometer bicycle ride from Sarajevo to Croatia, commemorating the Battle of Medoc Pocket. And that's where Canadian troops faced the most intense warfare since they've been peacekeepers. And the proceeds go to wounded warriors, and it's extremely important. I'll be there with my old guitar to do some songs and stories, and you can find out more at pennybrynfarm.ca. pennybrynfarm.ca. And thank you so much for riding along this week. I sure hope you can saddle up and join us again next week right here at the same time. And as always, thanks to our great support crew, Mark and Kathy McMillan. And remember, if you're looking for tractor parts, any make, any year, see Mark's page, bctractorparts.com. And to subscribe to Canadian Cowboy Country Magazine, just call 1-800-943-7336 or see cowboycountrymagazine.com. Till next week, I'm Hugh McLennan. Hope to see you down the trail somewhere real soon.